Sarah Chen had spent 12 years building her company from a kitchen table. No investors, no connections, just relentless work, 2 failed prototypes, and a belief that clean water filtration technology could change rural communities across 3 continents. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from. She had arrived at the Wellington Group, a boardroom that Tuesday morning in a simple grey blazer, carrying a worn leather portfolio, her hair pulled back without ceremony. She looked ordinary, and that was precisely the problem for men like Richard Harlow. Richard was the kind of investor who measured a person's worth by the cut of their suit and the brand on their wrist. He had made his fortune early, inherited more, and spent the last decade deciding who deserved a seat at important tables. Today's meeting was about a potential merger between 2 mid-sized tech firms, and Sarah had been quietly invited by the CEO, Marcus Webb, who had seen her work firsthand in Southeast Asia, but Richard didn't know that. He only saw a woman who didn't belong. "Marcus," Richard said loudly, leaning back in his chair with theatrical ease, "are we expecting someone important? Or did facilities send us a new intern?" Polite laughter rippled across the table. Sarah sat down without expression, opened her portfolio and said nothing. Richard wasn't finished. He turned to the man beside him and stage whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Nobody. Absolute nobody. I don't know why Marcus insists on filling these rooms with furniture." More laughter. The junior executives laughed the hardest. They always did. Sarah uncapped her pen and wrote a single note on her notepad, then looked up at the window, perfectly calm. Marcus cleared his throat and began the meeting. Presentations were made, numbers were discussed, proposals exchanged across polished mahogany. Richard dominated every pause, interrupting twice, correcting once unnecessarily, and reminding the room 3 separate times of a deal he had closed. In Dubai, Sarah contributed 2 precise observations that Marcus acknowledged with visible relief. Richard talked over both of them. 40 minutes in, Sarah's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen and stood quietly. "Excuse me one moment," she said, and stepped just slightly away from the table, not out of the room, just enough for courtesy, and answered. "Yes," she said. Then she listened. Then she said, 2 words, "I agree." She ended the call, returned to her seat, and placed the phone face down on the table. The room had gone very still, because the man sitting directly across from her, David Park, the most senior partner at the table and a notoriously difficult personality, had gone pale. He had recognized the voice on the other end of that call. The whole table had heard it through the brief silence. It was Governor Alan Whitfield, not an aide, not an assistant. The governor himself calling Sarah directly on a Tuesday morning mid-meeting to discuss the state's landmark infrastructure initiative, a $40 million clean water project that had been headline news for 3 weeks. Every person in that room had read about it. Several had quietly submitted proposals for it. None of them had received a personal call. Richard Harlow set down his pen. The junior executive stopped smiling. Marcus said nothing, but the corner of his mouth moved in a way that wasn't quite a smile, and wasn't quite satisfaction, but was somewhere exactly between the two. Sarah continued reading her notes as if nothing had happened, because for her nothing extraordinary had. This was simply Tuesday. Richard did not speak again for 11 minutes. When he finally did, his voice had lost its performance. He asked Sarah a genuine question about her filtration model, a real question, careful and specific, and she answered it fully, without warmth or coldness, with the clean efficiency of someone who had answered it 1,000 times for people who actually deserved to hear it. The meeting ended. People gathered their things. Richard approached her near the door, hand extended. "I'd like to know more about your work," he said. Sarah shook his hand. "I know," she said simply, and walked out first. She didn't need his apology. She didn't need his validation. She had the governor's number saved under his first name. A $40 million project underway, and 12 years of quiet, unwitnessed excellence that had never once waited for a man like Richard Harlow to notice it. The room had frozen. She had simply thawed it, then walked out. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories, where real courage speaks louder than any title.